Good morning and welcome to Sunrise Daily, your daily dose of sunshine. I'm Maupe Ogun Yusuf.
Good morning and welcome. I'm Kayla Megwa.
Well, we're taking you all the way to Bokos in Jos, South local government area of Plateau State, where we've been noticing, it's been reported that about 50 people have lost their lives over the period of 1 week. Just yesterday, the National Security Advisor, Mr. Nuhu Ribadu, visited the place, talking about government's determination to stamp out these killings, which have become quite frequent in Plateau State. Well, we've been seeing sporadic killings in different parts of the country, coming from Edo State, where we understand that 11 itinerant travelers were killed as a result of ethnic profiling in the Jos part of the country, especially in the north-central area. We've been noticing that, people have been reporting killings. Communities have been systematically razed down, burned, their homes burned, farmlands burned, people killed for no reason. In this particular instance, we heard that the gunmen came on motorbikes, shooting sporadically into the air and killing anyone that they saw in their path. Well, this morning, we're going to be talking to a resident in that particular area to let us know what precisely is happening in that particular area, what the experience has been, and also we'll be speaking much later to a security expert to find out what it is that we can do to stem the tide. But this was what happened yesterday when the National Security Advisor, Mr. Nuhu Ribadu, visited the place.
Bokos local government area of Plateau State is mourning the death of 50 persons killed within a week in attacks that ravaged over 5 communities, with over 300 houses burned by suspected herdsmen. One of the early callers to the state is the National Security Advisor, who visited troops of Operation Safe Haven at its headquarters in Jos, where he highlighted the importance of peaceful coexistence amongst Nigerians.
All of us will have to come together. Everybody do have a role to play, particularly communities, those who have been living together for years and decades. I think time has come for us to say enough is enough. Our security forces are doing well, but our communities will do even better.
To ascertain the level of destruction in the affected communities, the Secretary to the Government of Plateau State leads a delegation to commiserate with affected victims, just as he provides some relief materials to displaced persons and those who lost some property due to the attack.
Unknown gunmen, as we call them in the country, but I call them terrorists, came riding on over 20 bikes, and they started shooting sporadically all over the town and killed over 40 people in different communities. The entire landscape around that area, when we went, you saw the pictures we show. That's why we made an effort to go so that the whole country, the whole world can see what happened. These people are living in abject poverty. Somebody has come in, their livelihood has been taken away from them. For God's sake, how do they recover?
On his part, the district head of Manguna community wants government to provide more security personnel in the affected communities in order to curb rural-urban migration.
Because of what has happened, there is trauma, there is intimidation, and nobody is prepared to stay in the village. And we're happy by what we have seen today.
A resident of Horiti community explains how over 30 persons were given a mass burial at a grave within the community, even as the search for the missing is still ongoing.
We discovered that about 35 corpses that were buried now. And also 18 people were injured. Some are in the hospital. We don't know actually, because we take some to Cottage Hospital Bokos. Some are in Jos. So actually we don't know exactly hospital they take the other people. And up to now we have not seen other people.
As the people of Bokos grieve over the attacks, over 700 persons are said to have been displaced from their ancestral homes and will require government's intervention and reinforcement of security personnel to enable the people return to their homes in order to continue their farming activities.
Well, we go all the way now to Bokos local government area where these attacks have occurred and speak with Mr. Luka Pampe, who is a resident there. Mr. Pampe, thank you so much for joining us this morning on Sunrise Daily. I do not know, were you there when some of these attacks occurred, or do you happen to live around?
Well, thank you very much, and good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. I was in Bokos, particularly in Daho, just 2 days before that horrible event, I would say, occurred. And I went back again after it has happened to be able to see what is actually going on. But there are limits to certain areas that even at the time that I went back to Bokos, that I could go because even in the broad daylight, after that horrible massacre, there were still gunshots that were still heard, around some of those particular areas in the true sense of the word. And to give us a sense of what has actually happened in Bokos is to actually go back and look at the event and the horrible event of 2023, where a number of people were attacked and killed in the same manner that this one has also occurred. And if you will recall, in April of 2022, in the same state, so that we can have a sense of what happened in Bokos, is the fact that over 142 people were killed around Kana, and then the Mangu incident also. So we saw the effort of the security in terms of those particular areas that I mentioned, particularly Bokos and Mangu share the same boundary. In fact, prior to the separation of creation of Bokos, as it were, Bokos was under Mangu local government. So the sporadic attacks that took place in December, January of 2023, I would say, the fact that we are able to address some of the consequences of that particular attack, we saw perhaps the movement of certain elements, criminals, as it were, from that axis who were given tough times by the security moving towards that particular angle. And I think we need to understand where Bokos is located. I heard you in your introduction mentioning the fact that Bokos is under Josad local government. No, Bokos is a local government on its own. In fact, it's a local government that borders Wamba on the other side, that is northwest in Nasarawa State. It borders Mangu on the northeast on the other side. And so when we saw the movement of these elements who, for one reason or the other, were chased either by the security or so towards areas like Mushu, they were able to move to the other side. And that is the northwestern part that share border with Nasarawa State. And here you'll be talking about areas like Mekatako, areas like Folok, areas like Manguna, areas like Taho, and the villages that are under those particular areas in the true sense of the word. And so clearly speaking, what has happened in Bokos, I would say, shouldn't have taken the security authorities, should I say, it shouldn't have caught them napping, in the true sense of the word. Because these are issues I expected that the intelligence that would have been gathered should have at least shown some sense of the fact that these elements are still hanging around those particular areas. And it must be noted by all Nigerians that the establishment of what I call super criminal camps or communities have given oxygen to these elements that often come out even in broad daylight to be able to attack communities in the true sense of the word. The one in Manguna and Aho, as it were, just like some reports have shown, took place in a broad daylight. It was around 2 o'clock, 2 p.m., in the afternoon, that movements of these elements were already identified and noticed by communities around those particular areas. So it wasn't as if all the attacks were in the night, when people were sleeping. No, it was in a broad daylight, when some of them have gone to farms, some of them have also gone for mining activities around those particular areas, leaving perhaps children and elderly at home who were massacred, gruesomely by these criminal elements in the true sense of it.
Well, Mr. Pompey, the correction which you, made about Bokos being the standalone local government area is taken. My colleague Kayla has questions for you.
Yes, really our condolences to everyone, because it's not the first time. On April the 2nd, we also saw attacks in Hurti, Josho, Dafo, and what's brought to mind is the peace efforts of the state governor, because I know that sometime last year, the governor of Plateau State was trying to get the communities to come together so we can find out what's really going on, find solutions to these problems. What do you make of, these recent killings and those peace efforts by the state governor? Would you say that those efforts have failed, or is there a different element that's been added to this crisis?
Well, it's relative to really respond to this in the affirmative, because if it has yielded the desired result, perhaps a lot of people will say that this carnage wouldn't have taken place in the magnitude in which it has occurred. On the other side of it, I would say yes, it has yielded some results, because a lot of people have also said that perhaps it would have been more than what we have seen in the true sense of the word. And to be fair to the governor, there are efforts that have been on ground since 2023. But I think that along the line, it appears as if we tend to lower down the tempo. We tend to slow down. We tend to tiptoe, behind these criminals rather than taking a lead in trying to, thwart any effort by these elements to be able to attack these communities in the true sense of the word. Now, if you look at the rate of attacks prior to this recent one, you could say that yes, there was a relative stability around those areas. In fact, Bokos has experienced some peace since this January of 2024, in the true sense of the word. We've not had attacks like that until the one that happened around February or thereabout, where some pockets of attacks were also reported around those particular areas. But I think where we seem to have gotten it wrong, despite all these efforts, is the fact that we don't do a clearance operation in most of these areas. And I keep mentioning this point because it's important for the security authorities to understand that the establishment of certain communities by these criminal elements, which I always call a criminal or super criminal camps in those areas, need to be cleared completely.
I want to talk. Let's not lose that point, Luca Pampe, because I remember that you ran for governor, or you wanted to be governor of your state under the PRP. Now, you're talking about something that many people have mentioned, but I want you to expand a little on that. You said these are called super criminal camps. Do the security operatives in Plateau State know about what you're talking about? And has there been any way that these super camps, and you said criminal communities, have been addressed by the security agencies or by the state government?
Yes. Well, I don't know whether the security is aware, because I'm not part of the security force on the Plateau. The best we do is, advocacy, to be able to bring to the knowledge of these authorities in the true sense of the word. Why I'm using that is that you will recall that when the Barkin Ladi and Riom incidences were so sporadic and so common at that time, there were a lot of, even on your platform, a lot of people, including members of the National Assembly from Plateau State, who have appeared to mention certain areas around Riom and Barkin Ladi, where these elements usually stay, and then launch their attacks from those particular areas. And you'll also recall that a lot has also been said with regards to the fact that in most cases, these people often come from certain communities that they have been able to capture. And I'm using the word capture carefully here, because there have been reports and incidences of land grabbing in those particular areas. So you can see that once those lands have been grabbed and they are able to settle in those particular areas, they establish for themselves a community. And for the fact that they are able to attack the neighboring communities and return back to that area, give you a sense of the fact that there is a super criminal camp in the true sense of the word. Now, if you take this further to places like Boko, then you can understand clearly that these are not people that perhaps came through the Wamba axis, through Farinrua, for example. Or you may not say that these are people who come from the axis sharing boundary with Panpan in the true sense of it. They live within those particular enclaves, those communities that most times they tend to attack them and run back to that places in the true sense of the word. So until and unless we're able to flush them out in those areas, we are not going to get it right as far as some of these issues are concerned. Yes, you can as well say that because of the pressure that was mounted by the security authorities on the plateau, on this particular element, they became a little bit calmer, over a period of time that we've seen. But the renewed attacks that we're seeing today has shown to us clearly that they still live within those particular areas and they launch their attack from there. I will say this and say this for the sake of posterity, that these people are not spirits. We are talking about over 70. The secretary to the government of the state has mentioned over 40 bikes. But for us in those communities, what we saw, some communities have reported, is the fact that there were over 70 of these bikes. And you can imagine that if each of these was carrying about 2 or 3 persons on that particular bike, which is usually their form of transportation, then if it is 3, then you can be talking about over almost 270 to 300 people that attack those particular communities. So again, the question that a lot of people will be asking is, why is it that they have festered around those particular areas for such a very long period of time? And if you ask our people, communities, they will certainly tell you, Mark, that the reality of it is that they know where these people live. They know where these people come from.
Mr. Pampe,
yes.
Just so we can start to wrap up, there was something the National Security Advisor said yesterday. He talked about the role of communities. Where do you think communities may be dropping the ball? I know that we've talked about the security agencies, we've talked about the executive. And by the way, these super criminal camps that you're talking about, it would be nice to have a proper reports to the executive or to the security agencies and the state, just so we can have something that we're following up on as you continue your advocacy work. But back to what the NSA said. Are there ways that the communities may be dropping the ball? Because he said this is everyone's job and someone is dropping the ball in the communities.
Well, quite interesting that you raised that issue. To the best of my knowledge, most of our communities have done the best that they could in this instance, under the circumstances that they have found themselves. I want to say this to Nigerians, that the best most of these communities can do is to run. That is the best they can do. If you go to most of these communities, there are no even infrastructures that will support communication, even to the security agencies in the true sense of the word. You take some villages in Manguna, for example, or in Dabo, you don't even have services or net telecommunication services in those areas. What responsibilities do you expect them to do? To take as far as this is concerned. So I believe that since the government is listening, there's need for us to develop these facilities and infrastructures in those areas to ensure for easy communication in the true sense of it. Then again, when you look at the road networks, some of those particular areas, there are places that I'm telling you, some of them have not seen tarred road, in their life, in the true sense of the word. There are no access facilities to those particular areas. But I agree that yes, communities have responsibilities. I also agree with what the Army Chief has said, that 70% is, of course, community and 30% is the military in the true sense of it. I agree with that. But what else can they do under a situation where they cannot even face the might of these people when they attack this community? Do you know the fury that these people come with? Do you know the kind of weapons that these people come with? Do you know the kind of speed that these people come with? Do you know the kind of wheels that these people ride as they go into these communities in the true sense of the word? So I believe that there can be little that the community can do as far as the current situation is concerned. All they can do is provide the necessary information for the security agents. But what is the response time of the security agents? Most of the time when you report such things, even when there are actionable intelligence that are volunteered by these communities, you end up finding a situation where the response time becomes very unfortunate. You find people coming after the ashes, after the food, after the people, after the houses have been burned to ashes. Then you find them, the security going to such communities as it were. So I think going forward, we need to look at deepening the quality of our infrastructures in some of these areas, in the true sense of it. We need to have more boots on ground, because I will tell you that if you look at the nature of those areas, some of them have not even seen some of these security agencies, except When incidences like this occur,
well,
then you
Mr.
find them
Pampe,
moving in
it's
large
really
numbers.
an unfortunate situation in Bokos local government area. And really, I mean, when one listens to what it is that you've had to say with regards to how these attacks occur, you say in broad daylight. Clearly, there are questions around the motives of the attackers. What exactly are they trying to achieve? Big questions continue to reign in that particular area. But we have to thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us this morning and telling us precisely what your account of the incidents that happened in the Bokos local government area, are. Well, thank you once more for joining us this morning. Mr. Luka Pampe is a resident of the state and also a former governorship aspirant on the platform of the PRP. We'll take a break about now and we'll be back shortly to discuss this matter even further. Please stay with us.
As early as 8 a.m. at the Isaac Borough Park by Mile 1 flyover along Aba Road, protesters from the Take It Back movement and the Niger Delta Congress, among others, are gathering for the Bring Back Same protests. There's a bit of a scuffle as the police try to stop the protests from going ahead at the park, insisting it wasn't approved for them and that they should go to the federal secretariat. They also try to stop journalists from recording.
The protesters were initially marching down from that way. That's where the Isaac Borough Park is located. And the police were escorting them, protecting them, until they got to this flyover, the CFC flyover, as it's popularly known here in Port Harcourt, and all hell broke loose. There was a little bit of a confrontation between the officer in charge of the police team. He said to them, "You have addressed the press, you have marched. I think it's time for you guys to disperse and go home." But the protesters said, "No, our voices have not been heard, and we are still within our rights to march."
The handful of protesters address the press before they start marching towards the federal secretariat.
We are here as Rivers people to march and express our grievances. We are not here to cause any harm. And this is the security men that have been here dispersing our people that have been coming. We are here, we are waiting for some of our members to come, and we will march on the street peacefully and air our grievances to the government. We are not here for violence.
Along the road, the protest leader says they are rejecting the state of emergency while security reinforcements arrive behind him.
Our position is that this state of emergency is illegal, and we are calling on Mr. President to reverse his decision on this state of emergency. The people of Rivers State have woken up, and today we have come to say, Mr. President, listen to your people.
He said, no, that we must leave now. And we said, no, we will not leave. That what we are doing is our civil right, and we have the permission of the police to even go ahead with what we are doing. The next thing they started doing, they started shooting tear gas canisters on us. Of course, it was a joint team from both the army, the police, the civil defense. They were all there. The next thing, the army started shooting sporadically on the air. Police started shooting tear gas canisters at us, chasing us, even arrested some of the reporters who came to cover the event.
And before you could know what was happening, the police started firing tear gas canisters. Somewhere here, this was where the whole disruption occurred. And people started scampering, for their safety. Even members of the public who were watching what was happening, they all ran. I was standing around when I was set upon by a policeman who I would call an overzealous one. He grabbed me, he brutalized me, and threw me into a van. But after like 5 minutes, I was released. So these are some of the hazards of the job. For the protest, it's over for today, but we don't know what tomorrow will bring. From the CFC flyover here in Port Harcourt, Charles Oporum, Channels Television News.
So it's going to be a mishmash of sorts, but the issues can be related, because some people will say that why do citizens protest? It's because of issues like what we see in Jos. etc. This morning, we're being joined by Dr. Charles Omole, who's the Director General, Institute for Police and Security Policy Research. He's also a lawyer and a national security expert. Dr. Charles Omole, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me. Good morning.
We also have joining us virtually Mr. Seyi Adetayo, who is the CEO of Eon's Intelligence and also a security expert. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Adetayo.
Yeah, good morning.
Well, these are the issues that we now have on our hand. I'm sure you must have heard Mr. Pampe when he spoke about the incident that happened. He gave a first, like an eyewitness account, even though he said he wasn't physically present at the time, but he had visited some days before and also visited right afterwards. And, you know, they had been noticing things in their environment. So let's start from there first before we come back to the Take It Back protest and what it is that they are demanding. But listening to what he said and the fact that the community had enjoyed relative peace prior to these latest attacks, where do you think we're getting this move around security wrong?
Well, I mean, the challenge is sometimes talking about insecurity in Nigeria is becoming a little bit depressing because it's like Groundhog Day, just going around in circles. And sometimes when we focus on the outcome, you know, we miss the fact that we actually need to look at the root causes of these things rather than the specific activities. The problem with insecurity in Nigeria have several sort of main issues to it. The first, in this particular instance, you know, there is a massive lack of trust in our security agencies by citizens. You know, you can't have a situation, for example, where police or any security agency will be in every corner of the nation. But without that security, without that trust, rather, what the nation loses is a huge, you know, a group of what I call human intelligence sources. Back in the West, you see them go on TV, they will tell you a crime happened 5 years ago on this street. Within 2 days, 100 people will call in to say, okay, I was on that street, I saw what happened and all that. That doesn't happen around here because people feel that sometimes even when they report, they become the target. So what you have is these huge human intelligence sources that every Nigerian is supposed to be for security agencies doesn't exist. And then, of course, the procured intelligence, which is now the people that the security agencies are now inserting into communities, they don't exist either. So what happens is getting credible information becomes difficult. And that, for me, is a problem here. You know, because you know, many times in the past I've addressed specific incidents, and then the same incident happened the following week, then the same incident happened the following week. So we can't keep talking about incidents without looking at the root causes. And I think that's probably where we need to look for solution.
Okay, let me come to you, Dr. Adetayo. You have heard, you know, the resident from Bokos local government area. Can you give us your own impressions of what he said? What did you take away as the things that are wrong, and do you see where we can begin to fix things right?
Okay, Maupe, thank you and good morning. Maupe, thank you and good morning. Maupe, thank you and good morning. Thank you and good morning. I think that the situation as it is today likely depends on how each parties or different parts of the communities are looking at the situation in Plateau State. We've heard from your guests, and I'm sure that if people from the other sides are invited to speak, they're also going to look at it from a different perspective. But by and large, my major takeaway from his comments is the fact that he said that the people has little or nothing to do. But I think that this issue basically lies on the people. No, we've been experiencing these situations for a long time, and these are people that have been living together, dancing together, eating together over the years. Today, They are now, there have been cases of killings. If you look at what happened in December 2023, I think over 300 people were killed, and incident also February 2024. My take here is that when the people decide that they want to make peace, they are ready to give peace a chance, then the efforts of the government, the efforts of the security agencies will begin to bring about meaning, will become impactful, then we'll begin to see the results. We need to understand this, that there is no how security agencies can put boots, because he was talking about we need more boots. The issue here is not about having more boots on the ground. The issue here is about looking at the root causes of this crisis, then call the parties involved, and also make them to see reasons why they must put an end to this. We've been having series of committees, series of interventions in the past, and the reason why they are not working is because the people are not allowing it to work. As long as we are still focused on and high for an eye, it will make everyone in the community to become blind.
Are you saying, sorry, Dr. Adetayo, to interrupt you. I don't know if you can hear me. Are you saying that this is a reprisal?
That is what it's looking at. Looking like if you're looking at, issues around perhaps something happened some months back, and, some people, because I saw a report where a journalist was saying that they cannot point out that this is the reason why this happened. But the truth is that if you look at the situations of the past, it has been around communities being sacked, lands being taken away from certain people. They want to take their land back, or some people were killed, and then they coming back to say, except we want to continue to deceive ourselves. These are being carried out by people in the same community. So we should ask ourselves. He himself talked about super camps in the community, that the people who were attacked, after attacking, went back to the community where they came from. Except we want to continue to deceive ourselves. It is not about how much the state government can do right now. It's not about how much the law enforcement or security agency can do about it. Is how far the people in Mango, in Bokos, are ready to allow peace to reign. It is not something
what he made reference to, sorry to interrupt you once more, what he made reference to were criminal super camps. That was what he said, not communities as such. Criminal super camps. In other words, it would seem that there is at least that's the impression I get, that there is a conglomeration of some sort of people who are living in a particular area, and people know that generally people who live there are bad people, and it seems that we've just left them. Nothing is happening. Nobody is tackling that conglomeration, it would seem. And that's where they live. According to him, when he went back there, they couldn't even still go back to the community fully because they could hear gunshots ringing from those quarters. So is this, will I say, is this negligence on our part, or are we saying that perhaps those super camps he was referring to are actually entirely livable communities? Are they communities, ethnic communities, from whence these attacks are coming?
Now, the question is, what forms a community? The people from communities. That's the reality. Whether they are thatch roofed houses, whether they are brick and mortar houses, they have people. The moment people are living in a particular place, taking a living, it's a community. Now, it depends on the formation, the types of the constituent of the people that are living in that community. They are communities, and they are known to be communities. And maybe often than not, there must have been interaction between those communities. You see, we need to. I'm speaking from security and intelligence standpoint here. Anyone that kills is or can be seen as a criminal, whether they are part of a community, they form the community, or they were brought into the community. They are criminals. And the action that they have carried out is a crime, as far as the law, is concerned. So whether we call them criminal communities or not, killings are regarded as a criminal act. So we need to look at how can we and then say, oh, oh, this just happened. It is not something that started now. There is a build-up to this. And that is what we need to look at. And as long as we've not created a situation where justice will be seen. Now, the people that are crying out, the reason why they are crying out is that they want justice. I heard the governor saying that they are going to prosecute the people who carry this out. Now, the question is that, will that prosecution assuage the pain of those whose relatives and family have been killed now? Will that be enough? Will that sufficiently stop them from revenging in the future? Or some people that are aggrieved revenging in the future? That's the issue that we need to look at. And I want to call our attention to Ife Modakeke. Today they are living peacefully now. But there was a time that these people, twice, they were at war. But something happened that made them to live peacefully today. And that's what we need to look at. Umbuleri, Aguleri, there was a time that they were at war. People there were killing, one another each other for a long time until, peace was brought to that town. And today they are living together. I remember there was a time when some four security vigilantes were killed at School of Nursing in Upo, which would have led into resurgence of that, communal clashes between Umuleri and Aguleri. Interventions were made. The leadership of the community were made to see reasons why they should not allow the pains of the past, the issues of the past to be brought back. And they allow reasons to prevail. And today they are living, peacefully. Okay. We can't get to that level in Plateau State.
All right, Dr. Aditya, let me bring it to Dr. Molly here. You've heard his own submissions. And in my experience, as a journalist, been, asking questions on these issues ever since they broke. It just has in one of the longest areas where we have, covered these issues from as far back as, say, 2010, 2011, is when we've been talking about killings in Jos. I want to find out from you, because oftentimes from what we now know, we know that usually if this is a reprisal, oftentimes it is not the community where the reprisal has happened that carried out the offense. Oftentimes it could be another community, or it could be one singular incident, an isolated incident that an entire village is made to pay for. In this instance, it's not yet clear what precisely has led to these very brutal attacks. Because when you think about how it has happened, we understand people on motorcycles, coming out with guns and just shooting sporadically in broad daylight, not targeting anyone, but targeting everyone. And at the end of the day, 50 people losing their lives. And those are the people that they can count and account for. 300 homes burnt, 700 people displaced, just like that. And these attacks, go on and on sporadically. And people always ask, what exactly is going on? The people of the community always say, look, it seems there is a grand plan. And people usually around the North Central, you've heard this in Benue, you've heard this in Jos, always say that there is a grand plan to take away their lands. They fear that that is what is happening. How do we begin to find, because I think it still boils down to that particular question. How do we begin to find because you've spoken about the absence of trust. That trust seems to be completely broken between the people and security agencies. But at the same time, the people acknowledge that over a year now, there have been no attacks. So they don't even know where this is coming from. What do you think needs to happen for, one, trust to be built again, and for us to be able to say we're actually making progress and making sure we stamp out these sort of attacks?
You see, to resolve matters like this, you have to approach it from two sides. The first is, what do you do to reduce the penchant for criminality, or reprisal, as you might want to call it? The second is, what can the security agencies do to deter those who are such minded? Now, the two have to go hand in hand. Now, clearly, in terms of security agencies, the pattern is the same in terms of, many people coming on motorbikes, even in the days of Boko Haram, attacking villages in the northeast, again, it's the same thing. They will come out of the bush on motorbikes, sometimes 50 motorbikes, and then you ask yourself why they will be on 50 motorbikes and ride for over an hour or 2 hours, and nobody stops them. So that comes to the side of what the government can do in terms of early warning system and things to deter it. But in terms of, it comes back to what I said first, in terms of confidence. The people don't have confidence in the fact that the government, I'm using the government to include security agencies here, can resolve issues for them. That's why they go for self-help. If I know that if, my house is burnt down by a particular group, if I report it to authorities, I know they will deal with it. That will reduce my desire to personally, respond. But once I've gotten to the point where it's like, look, government, they're not going to do anything. So it's like, so everything's based on what I can do. And I think that is the problem here. And it could be a day, a month, a year. People, when they're that minded, they will. And what they tend to do is look for the weakest point where they feel they can get, they have a way of gathering their own intelligence, either a sort of a town, a period where, people are weak. For example, it's known that in some parts of the world, during the Ramadan season, for example, certain criminality increases because the assumption is during that period, people are not as strong physically, compared to, outside that. So they target periods where they feel they can have maximum impact. So the issue here is still boils down to that same thing, trust.
And can we really because there are big questions around the motive. If you say, okay, somebody in our community was murdered, we're not happy about it, somebody in our community was killed, there was a clash somewhere, can we really justify this sort of attacks, this sort of brazen, reckless, brutal attacks where people just take out anybody, be they elderly people, be they children, let us not also forget, because in this context of trust, and when you look at what has happened in the entire, well, not central, yes, but also some parts of the northeast. When you're looking at Taraba, you're looking at Adama, which don't exactly fall under north central, but also have some of the, the makeup that we see in the north central area. And you had voices like General T.Y. Danjuma, who spoke, and that has not been forgotten, when he said that, look, you have to defend yourselves. The security agencies have been compromised. Can we really, have we been able to answer fully as a country what exactly the motive of those who are carrying out these attacks are? Well, I think the motives are well known. And, are they? Oh, yes, so the motives are well known. What are the motives? Well, I mean, it would be hearsay on my part, but I think one can say there are ethnic and religious related, motives for some of the things that's happening. We saw what happened in Southern Kaduna for a long time, until this new administration there, and it was recurring almost every few weeks. Another incident will happen in Southern Kaduna, So clearly that's an example of an agenda, as it were. And again, the issue here is a matter of the government demonstrating that they can deal with this, and by doing that, they're giving people confidence. As long as we just throw our hands up and we give condolence messages, and all that, and then the next thing happened. What that does is it allows it to continue. It has become an industry, more or less.
When you talk about it like that, then we have to start looking for solutions.
Yes.
To combat an industry. I've always said, a money-making venture. If people are making money from chaos, the chaos will continue. Now, just a few questions about these situations. Like in Bokos, it's not just Bokos. Bokos, Manguna, Hurti, Josho, Dafo. These are a lot of communities. Are we saying that there's no police presence in any of these places? Are these unmanned, are these unpoliced parts of Plateau State? Is that what we can point and say to the governor? That you have these areas in local governments in your state that do not have police presence. So crime and criminality can go on, and then we now have, every month we come back and we have the same conversation about what has happened in Plateau State? No, they do have police presence. I mean, every local government in Nigeria do have police presence. Of course, the number may vary, and I do also know that the numbers in Plateau was increased. Because there are certain states that have more police numbers than other states, and I know the numbers in Plateau was increased recently. So there is police presence. The question has to be,
Are they in sufficient numbers? That's number one. Number two, are they properly tooled and equipped to deal with things like this? That's number two. Number three, are there possibility of fifth columnists within the security agencies that allow these things to happen? You know, turn a blind eye to it. I mean, one of the challenges, if you read all the insecurity incidents in Nigeria, Boko Haram, everything, when the media reports it, the police tend to show up after the criminals have gone.
Yes.
In practically every case. You know, and the question you ask yourself is why? Why would criminals be operating in a village for, say, 2-3 hours, murdering people, and security agencies are nowhere to be found, and then after they've left, suddenly security agencies appear? So I mean, it's not within the realm of reason for people to suspect that there might be some fifth columnists within the security agencies that sympathize with the aims or objectives of these criminals and therefore steer them away. You know, it's like deliberate blindness, so to speak. But these things, you know, the government might say, no, it's not happening, but then prove it. Prove that it's not happening by making an example showing that indeed these things can be tackled. And these things can be tackled.
The Inspector General of Police's office has tactical teams.
Yes.
Were sent to troubled areas. Special teams, specially trained to handle these situations. What's happening with those tactical teams?
The challenge, I think, with the policing structure is the fact that I don't think the police have been given, the current Inspector General of Police started what they call the Special Intervention Squad. But the vision, original vision behind it was for the Special Intervention Squad to exist in every state. In other words, they are there as standby force to respond. That requires a level of resources that I don't think the police have. So what they do is they'll have the Special Intervention Squad only in certain areas. So which means there is always this gap between when they are deployed. For example, if something's happening in Niger State and the Special Intervention Squad are in Abuja, it will take them time to get to the location. Whereas if there is a Niger State contingent that permanently in Niger State, they can respond faster. But the level of resources needed for such nationwide blanket, I don't think the police have been provided. So they are doing the best they can, I think, with whatever little resources they have. But the key issue there is there's a need for deterrence. You know, one of the things, even not just beyond security, even basic crime, one of the things that allows crime to thrive in this country is lack of consequence. No deterrence.
Lack of consequence.
You know, and because there's lack of consequence, people are emboldened to do even more. I was telling somebody yesterday, I said politicians are the same everywhere. You know, in England, in the US, they're all the same. I said the difference is they live in a society where there are consequences. That restrains the potential excesses. But when you are in a society like this, where there's no consequence, then clearly the raw political, manipulations will come out. And I think that's the challenge we have with our security. You know, if we make example of certain events like this, for example, they go after them, and by the way, the other thing is, we need to combine kinetic and non-kinetic approaches to solving this problem. It's not just about catching the criminals and killing them, or or sending bombs. It's about looking for what actually are the root causes. There are, he was mentioning the issue about Ife and Modakeke earlier. Part of what resolved that was not just about shooting people. It's about dialogue. It's about finding out what actually is the issue. You know, and we have peace there today. So it's not everything that will have to be kinetic. So what is a kinetic strategy that the Plateau State government have in dealing with this recurring insecurity?
I want to be able to talk with Dr. Adetayo a little bit about this. You've heard what Dr. Mole said about the kinetic and non-kinetic approaches. And we even hear it from the military, which is interesting. Whenever the Chief of Defense Staff is speaking, he always says, we're doing the kinetic bit, we need you to do the non-kinetic bit. And I think the National Security Advisor in some way was alluding to that when he said, look, the communities have their role to play. And I've heard you speak up about that in the course of our conversations today. What's now? A meeting, a peace-building meeting? We have peace builders across this country from all kinds of agencies doing what they can. Is it peace building or is this a poverty situation? And how do we stop these reprisals?
Okay, thanks. So issue is that we cannot continue to do the same thing over and over, and then we're expecting a different result. We need to have a change of approach. Look at what we've done wrong in the past in terms of trying to bring an end to these killings. And like I said, and thanks to Dr. Omole, also, elaborating more on that. There's a fact that the people must be made to agree to the fact that peace must reign. Now, see, talking about super camps, you see, in each community, we have criminal elements. And it's possible somebody will leave one community to go and foment trouble in another community. How do we look at the action of that person? Do we see it as an isolated issue, an individual crime, or we see it as, oh, these people have come again and they have come to come and attack us, and they were responding as a community instead of treating the matter as an individual action. So over the year, there have been this distrust. There are lots of people that are actually benefiting from this crisis. And until all those elements too are also identified, the enterprise that this crisis has created, they are also demolished. So we have to look at all those areas, talking to the people, making the people to see reasons why they need to come together. Also looking at those who have been benefiting from this crisis over the years to try and demolish their enterprise so that the peace building and that government will try to implement will work. And this should not be left to Plateau State government. I think it's something that has to be taken up at the federal level, involving the Plateau State government, where they have leaders of means, leaders that have, that people respect, and those that are so, conversant and so, experienced in the area of building peace, dialoguing, crisis management, so that bringing them into this new non-kinetic measure and trying to resolve this issue. We need to make the community to see that as long as we continue to see ourselves from tribal lenses, religious lens, tribal lens, we will not find solution. Criminals are criminals. When criminals try to do something, let us treat them as criminals and not to look at it from the ethnic perspective to say, oh, these people have come. These, I can tell you, were things that started as small criminal enterprise that metamorphosed into something else. The solution lies with the people, but we must help the people to find this solution. Everything is not about boots, guns, and then ammunition and the military on the ground. There is no amount of soldiers that will be deployed to Bokos, to Mango, that can bring about peace, because the place is an agricultural and a very rural area. There are no definite routes that can be manned. People can come in from different angles. There are isolated hamlets, farmsteads, and communities that are far from other ones that things can happen there, and it will take a long time before even the bigger settlements will get to know that something has happened to a small hamlet or a small settlement.
Dr. Adetayo, just so we don't miss this particular conversation, speaking of distrust that the people have, Dr. Omole had talked about earlier, human intelligence sources, and how we don't have that in this country in many ways. Interestingly, yesterday was, our police day, the first in Nigeria's history. And of course, the conversation around the protests came up. We had a very terrible situation here in Channels Television where our reporter in Rivers State, Charles Oporum, was manhandled, beaten up by a police officer. And of course, we've been calling all day. We've been asking that the Nigerian police force identify this police officer who manhandled Charles Oporum and bring him to justice. We need to see that justice is done in this particular situation. But let's talk a little bit about that trust deficit in the light of the protests that we saw yesterday. One of the ideas that we gave here on the program was, instead of telling protesters not to come out because they're going to be dignitaries, it will be an opportunity for you to market how democratic you are as a police force, to be protecting the protesters, doing your job while you're celebrating your day. It's an opportunity, and I think in many ways that was lost in many parts of the country. But I want you to speak to that trust deficit and how the police force can engender trust in the Nigerian people again.
Well, I think I must say that policing can be said to be better now than it used to be. And it is not entirely possible that we'll find a situation where one way or the other during incident like that, that we may not have, unfortunate incident like the one that you just mentioned, journalists, and that also speaks to the hazard of the job, where in the course of the commotion, journalists could fall a victim. And I believe that China's TV's leadership has a way in which they engage the law enforcement agencies to ensure that if the police officers involved have done something wrong, they will definitely get the response that they deserve, and the kind of justice that can bring about closure to your organization. But that, I would say that I also need to also say that protests is an issue of rights, and also we must also recognize the fact that people not protesting is also they have right not to protest. And when one is trying to protest, protest should not hinder the rights of those who do not want to protest. And likely we just have to look at how those that are to ensure that those who are protesting do not in any way, cross and impede the activities of those who are not protesting. We can do better, and we should just expect that we'll continue to do better. Even in the United States of America, the so-called version of democracy and civilization, we still have cases where, in the course of them trying to, maintain law and order, protesters, tear gas were being shot at protesters, and even journalists also were hit or arrested in the process, but later they were cleared. It is part, of those things that happen when there is protest and they are trying to actually manage or control protesters. Now, there's always a thin line between, a protest being peaceful and the protest later not becoming peaceful.
Dr. Adetayo, I'm going to have to stop you there, because I've heard your thoughts on that. Just so I can get Dr. Mole's thoughts on that. He's saying this is just part of it. When a journalist is doing his job and the police attacks him, that's not part of the job, is it?
No, it's not part of the job, but I think what he was saying, which is true in any country, that there's no way one IGP, doesn't matter how many instructions he gives out, can control the behavior of 300,000 plus officers. There will always be elements that will not, in fact, that's why some of them are disciplined, because they know that what they've done is against protocol. So one can make excuses for that. But I think, in the terms of the discussion you were talking about all this community, one thing that I think is essential, I need to say this, very critical. About 2.5 years ago, the then IG, Al-Khali Baba, gave a speech in which he identified that there are over 80 armed non-state actor groups in Nigeria. Now, the challenge is, for any crime to take place, we say you need motive, means, and opportunity. So which means that there are lots of guns for hire all over the country, in every community.
What we can hope is that those guns will not be deployed, or will not be turned on citizens and on journalists who are just trying to do their job. We're totally out of time, gentlemen. We have to thank you both for coming on the program this morning. We're hoping that this will be an ongoing conversation. Dr. Charles Omole is the Director General, Institute for Police and Security Policy Research, and we've also been speaking with Dr. Seyi Adetayo, who's the CEO of Eons Intelligence. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on the program this morning. Well, that's where we wrap up Sunrise Daily this beautiful Tuesday morning. Thank you so much for being a part of the program. I'm Maokwe Ogunyusuf.
I'm Kayla Megwa. Have a great day ahead.